Nelson has a college town aura. It comes from the days of its university past. Nelson residents have clearly shown they want these days back again. They want their degree-granting university back in its rightful place, and a revived art school and writing school. Continuing expansion of the courses offered by our community college is seen as vital, as is the fostering of the wide choice of grade school education now available in the area.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Shaw Cable's Nelson Nightline phone-in talk show. Our topic tonight is post-secondary education on the 95th anniversary of the birthday of Nelson. Since the closure of the David Thompson University Centre in 1984, post-secondary education has been used as a political football locally. The recent release of the Nelson and Area Economic Development Commission's Economic Strategy for the 90s report, which identified education as one of the top priority development sectors for the local community, has brought the issue to the forefront. This report identified education as a clean, sustainable, and marketable industry with a strong growth potential for the area. Meanwhile, local residents have been waiting to hear from the provincial government about a promised examination of the feasibility of the re-establishment of a fully developed, legislatively protected post-secondary institution in Nelson. This week, Nelson Creston MLA Corky Evans was reported to say that a commission into post-secondary education for the area is not likely in the near future, citing the provincial government deficit as a cause for the indefinite delay. We offer you tonight on Nelson Nightline the opportunity to phone in and express your opinions and ideas about what types of educational institutions you would like to see developed in Nelson and how this should be financed. Tonight we will take viewers' calls at 354-4200. Our special guests tonight are Dr. Pat Murphy of the Nelson University Centre, Judith MacKenzie of the Kootenay School of the Arts, and Alderman Marty Horswill, Chairman of the City's Educational Steering Committee. The show will be rebroadcast March 20th at 11 a.m. and Sunday, March 22nd at 8 p.m. My co-host for tonight again is Marianne Bond. Good evening, Marianne.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We'll start with our old-style politician, Alderman Horswill. Nelson's involvement in post-secondary education can be traced back to the formation of the Nelson University Club in 1903, which actively lobbied for a BC university. Marty, can you briefly describe Nelson's history as an educational centre for our viewers, particularly those new to the area?
Sure, thank you, Marianne. I guess it's fitting that I be dressed in the era of the early part of the century as we start talking about Nelson's history back then. It also happens to be Nelson's 95th birthday today for the interest of our listeners. So I thought both because I am an old-style politician and because of the occasion, I would dress up in this fine old garb. Nelson's involvement in post-secondary education definitely does go back to the turn of the century, as you mentioned, with the University Club here in the early days of the century lobbying to establish UBC. Our own community's involvement in education here dates from about a half century later when a small group of individuals living in Nelson had the vision of a university forming here and started a very small effort and managed to persuade the Diocese of Kootenay, the Roman Catholic Church, to support their efforts and thereby established a church-sponsored university known as Notre Dame University. It initially was able to grant degrees through an affiliation with Gonzaga University in Spokane, which was similarly a Catholic university. Later, they gained affiliation with St. Francis Xavier in Eastern Canada and offered at that point a Canadian degree, and eventually got a charter from the province of British Columbia, I believe it was in 1963, and were then able to offer their own degrees. Also in the 50s, and I believe this came slightly later than the start of Notre Dame, another group of people saw the opportunity to start an arts program, and it began initially as a summer school. And after a few years of operation as a summer school, they saw the opportunity to actually turn it into an art school. These were a couple of people who were active in education at that time, one of whom was my high school music teacher, Ed Baravalli, and the other was the originator of Oliver's Bookstore, Bain Oliver, were the original two people behind the art school. And after a couple of years of operation, a renowned sculptor from, I believe it was from Czechoslovakia, Željko Kohunzik, came through Nelson, liked the community, liked the effort to start the art school, and he joined forces with Ed and Bain, and we soon thereafter had a full-fledged art school. That effort started again as a small, privately, locally initiated effort without government support, but after a few years it gained government support and became a government-financed art school known as the Kootenai School of Art. It was a visual art program exclusively in its early years. Another effort that was started locally, in this case it was begun by City Council, seeing the need for a vocational school in the Kootenays. Council actually purchased the land in Rosemont that is now the Rosemont campus of Selkirk College on a purely speculative basis, and offered the land to the province in order that the province would then locate a vocational school in this community. That effort was successful. The vocational school was established in Nelson. In the 60s, across the province, there was the establishment of what is now known as our community college system. And the community college for our region was established in Selkirk. There was an effort in the years leading up to that by Nelson to have the university that already existed in this community taken over by the province to become the Kootenai aspect of the province-wide system. That was not successful, and the college was located instead in Castlegar. And shortly after that, both the vocational school and the Kootenai School of Art, which were government-financed, became part of the community college system administered by Selkirk College. Then in the early 70s, there was a movement within Nelson to urge the province to take over the operations of Notre Dame University and make the university a publicly operated and financed institution. That led to the government in 1973, I believe it was, establishing a Royal Commission to look at education in the Kootenays. That Royal Commission ultimately recommended that Notre Dame University be taken over by the province and operated as a provincially funded university for the Kootenays, with a structured connection between this university, Selkirk College, and a college to be located in the East Kootenays. That Royal Commission recommendation was never implemented. There was a change of government between the time it came down and the implementation could take place. What resulted out of that instead was the establishment of the East Kootenai Community College in Cranbrook and the purchase and closure of Notre Dame University, but instead it was reopened as David Thompson University Center, where the facilities were operated and managed by Selkirk College, which also offered some courses out of that facility. In particular, the arts, the former Kootenai School of Arts programs were operated by Selkirk out of the former university campus. And the University of Victoria and Simon Fraser University both offered university-level programs out of that campus, but not as part of a coherent unified program. They were each offering separate programs and offering separate degrees from their separate campuses. That situation continued from 1977 till 1983, when the province quite abruptly closed David Thompson University Centre. And the situation we have today is basically the continuation or the consequence of that decision made in 1983. So that's a rather long explanation, but I'm afraid there's a lot of history behind all of this.
Thank you, Marty. We'll continue on with Pat Murphy with the Nelson University Centre. Maybe you can tell us just briefly, aside from what Marty said, about how NUC started and what your mandate, you perceive your mandate to be.
Right. Well, taking off from where Marty stopped
Yes.
is exactly where the history of NUC starts. In 1984, at the request of the city, a nonprofit society was formed, and the purpose of which was to bring post-secondary education back to Nelson and to seek out people who could occupy the campus and to keep it running. And that was the Kootenai Educational and Recreational Society. So while many of the board members continued actively to search for someone to occupy the campus and keep it alive, there also was the hope and the dream of a degree-granting university. And the group that undertook that was a subcommittee of CURS called the Academic Council, headed by Dr. Barch and Russ MacArthur, and there are other people that I'm not familiar with, but a whole group of community people. In that process, there were a lot of questionnaires that went out to community people about what they wanted in programming, what they would like to see, and there were a lot of attempts through various institutions to bring those programs, what we call broker those programs here. And while a lot of balloons were let up, the only successful one started back in 1987, in which Gonzaga University, again, repeating some history, was able to offer a master's in special education. And over 23 people did graduate through that program offered here on this campus. At the same time, by historical, not fluke, but chance or synchronicity, I guess is the word they use today, one of the professors from Eastern Washington University happened upon our campus and said maybe we could offer courses. So a second program, the Bachelor of Arts in General Studies, was started in 1987. We've enrolled something closer to 50 people in that program, quite a few of whom are quite close to graduating, but some have gone on, and many have completed their teaching certificate and are now teachers in the system. However, the Nelson University Center story on its own starts in 1989 when a window of opportunity became available. The city, in its generosity, gave some seed money to the startup of offering our own courses. The Canadian International College offered us administrative and classroom space. And because we have the human resources in this community and access to a university library, which is the David Thompson Library that the community has saved and very actively saved for that next university, we were able to start. And so in the fall of 1989, we started with 26 students. We offered 6 courses. And we have now operated and are about to complete our 3rd year of operation. And it's due to the board of what is now the NUC Education Society, because their charter has been changed to reflect the new reality. And so we have some very active members on that board. We have an academic council, we're about 12 people too, who look at the operation, and we have very active faculty. And the faculty are growing. It's at first, and it continues to be, we have more applications to teach often than for students. Our first goal, though, in 1989, we was successfully, after approaching the coastal universities for some type of transfer arrangement, and because of the complexity of the British Columbia post-secondary education system, were unable to complete that, but we were able to go through Eastern Washington because of our track record with them. The Eastern Washington University Senate, the state legislature of Washington, and their accrediting agency looked at our courses and said, we will accept your courses in transfer. So while we're not affiliated, as what happened with Notre Dame, with those other institutions, we do have a transfer agreement and a track record. We have also an arrangement with Mount St. Vincent's in Nova Scotia. That goes back to the St. Francis Xavier one. So, I mean, history continues to repeat itself, which is quite interesting. And last summer, we were able to get a course transferred to Guelph University in their environmental engineering course. Currently, we are in negotiations with the province. We have been recognized for our students to receive student loans. No, I think it's for students to get assistance through the student assistant programs. And we're continuing to talk to the government. There is, under Bill 24, another avenue for us as a society, as technically a private institution, and that commission is just now starting to evolve, so we have that group to talk to. And we've been talking with our MLA. The board has a policy of being nonpartisan and to work with the party in power because of the history of post-secondary education in Nelson. It's very important that we keep to the issues, and that's to get a university that will be here for a very long time, and one of quality that reflects what we feel, all of us who've moved to Nelson, is those qualities of Nelson. And therefore, the program, which maybe we can talk about later because I know your time constraints, but I think we have developed a very unique post-secondary university program in liberal arts and sciences. We're told by experts who get money for going around and talking about this thing that it is the program of the future. But more than anything else, it reflects, I think, the quality of Nelson. That is that we're looking at developing global education, that the program is integrated, that is, it's developed from the student's point of view, that it will give them a broad base to do what they need to do in the future, that is to be flexible and risk-taking people, that it's from original sources, and that reflects the readership that we have here in Nelson, because we know that the municipal library is one of the most used libraries in terms of readership. We are also looking at a teaching university, and most importantly, a small university in which people count. And I think that's the type of university we're reflecting and carrying on that tradition that has been here.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Judith, maybe you can give us a little bit about where Kootenai School of the Art is today.
Well, Kootenai School of the Art is also a revival. It's a revival of the art school that was here and was closed when DTUC was closed. And as many people I'm sure know, DTUC was mainly an art school. More than 75% of its student base was in the arts programs. It has a wonderful reputation worldwide. Many of the people who are working as artists nowadays and teaching as artists came out of that program, quite well respected. So, you know, Nelson has a wonderful record in the arts. One of the things that drew me to this community was its history and the number of people who stayed even after the art school was closed. And it's those resources that we're drawing on now. I think we're very fortunate to have those people here. So we started out we've been just going a year. We have running by a working committee that is 14 dedicated volunteers who've been working really hard for the last year. We opened our first classes in September. We have now 120 students have been enrolled in our classes. We are working on a night school basis pretty much. Right now we only have one space that works as the type of class that we would like to, and that's mainly because of space restraints, not because of student restraints. We had many more students than we could enroll in our program. So we have, I think, good expectations in the next while. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. There's the two groups here, and I've heard both in writings in the Daily News and in other locations, some sort of rift between you. What worries me, and I think what worries a lot of people, is that when the government in power now made some promises about starting up university in the Kootenays, you were both on the bandwagon to say, I would like to be the university in place. Is there any chance of you two groups working together? Can you work together to work as a unified force to get a university locally evolved? Start with you, Judith.
Well, one thing I could say is that our aspirations for degree granting they'll only work if we have an educational body that can give a degree. That's not the direction that we're focused in going. We would like to give a degree in conjunction with another body. So,
Like an NUC.
yeah, like NUC.
And are you two meeting together to coordinate your forces rather than work separately and apart?
We've had the steering committee with our academic council have had a couple of meetings in which we've explored, and what's so difficult is it seems to jump the gun. NUC has the goal of being degree granting in the liberal arts and sciences, in fine arts, and in education. Yes. I think the agreement that we came to is that as institutions we can share space, we can share facilities, we can work together towards our programming. The development of a university or an art school don't happen overnight. And so to put the spotlight on both and say there's a rift, I think is a misunderstanding. There are two types of complementary educational institutions. And while we're at it, a university of the type and the program that we have is a complement to the existing institutions that are in the Kootenays. And that I think both groups are working to bring education as, I sometimes hesitate to use the word industry, but they use it in that way, as a mainstay, as a generator of the economy. Because we know there are other areas of the same kind of beauty and of the same kind of quality all over the world in which education is the major focus of those, like in the New England states is one area, various pockets around the world. And I think what makes this area so conducive to education is its beauty, its natural resources, and its access to recreation facilities. So it draws those kinds of people who can sit back and look at the world. I mean, even in China, this was a tradition that the institutions weren't in the cities, they were away. In England, I mean, Oxford and Cambridge were rural areas in which you get away and you study. And I think that that is a mode that many of the mega-trend people would see that's happening. And I think that that's why Nelson has always been at the forefront of many things, including education. So I don't see the rift other than that there is the financial restriction. But as they had a and in a morning program this morning, they were saying in Port Alberni, and they were saying, well, you know, jobs and this kind of thing. And this lady was saying, well, when you don't have one, what you do is you jump in with both feet and you do whatever it will take to make it work. And I think that's what represents KSA and NUC. We have jumped in with both feet or 4 feet or how many ever feet it is. And we will make it work because we know that this is part of the community. This reflects the needs and the aspirations of the community.
Marty, can you comment on what the city's currently doing to foster Nelson as an educational center, foster the development of it as an educational center?
Well, I guess what the city has been doing is asking itself exactly the same question that Morrie just posed. What are the implications of two different proposals being presented to the government in isolation, one from the other, without coordination? Is that the best way for Nelson to realize its goals? Particularly, is that the best way to approach a new government with a completely different agenda towards post-secondary education from the one that existed when both these educational institutions came to be into being, and when I presume their initial strategy for achieving their goals was formulated. And so what I started to do shortly after the election was to speak to other community leaders and people who were concerned about the whole goal of Nelson, but who were not directly connected with either of the existing educational groups, to see what they thought, and discovered that my concerns were shared quite widely. As a result of that, I began to work quite closely with the Economic Development Commission Educational Task Force chairperson to see what we could do as people concerned with what the community was trying to gain from this. And it's I mean, the significance of a post-secondary institution in our community is, first of all, educational, but it's very important in terms of economics and in terms of the overall quality of life that we have in the community. So there are lots of people in the community have an interest in this whose expertise isn't directly in the educational field. Our initial thought was that perhaps we could use a bit of local funding, perhaps piggybacked with some government funding, to find somebody outside of the community who had no connection with either the existing groups or any of the past history around Selkirk College and the other educational politics, if you like, to come to the community, work with the groups, work with the community leaders, get a sense from the public what the community wished to see happen, and then find a way to put that in a package which could be sold to the provincial government, which also means therefore having some sense of what the government's interest in all of this is as well. That proposal was not well received by the two groups, and while we were still considering how to deal with that lack of receptivity, the mayor and myself and the city administrator went to Victoria and spoke to the minister. And the one important thing we realized at that point was that our expectation and wish that there would be an early commission on post-secondary education for Nelson, where the community would have to make a presentation and where we felt the need for some unity and coherence existed to be able to present something to that commission that was clearly supported solidly by the community. That commission, in fact, was not going to happen quickly as we had thought, and that therefore the urgency to have somebody come in and put this proposal together wasn't there. So we've continued to meet. We've just had a meeting with KSA and NUC last week, and we've suggested another approach to, again, try to bring about precisely the kind of unity we're talking about. What I think everybody on council is wondering about at this point and would very much value hearing is precisely what the average person on the street thinks about this whole situation. And it seems to me there are three main questions that we need answers to. The first one is, does the community think that council should take a proactive leadership role in this situation in ensuring that the community has a unified position that it can present to the government? Or should council take a more passive role and simply follow the leadership of the educational groups as they pursue their separate interests? So that's the first question that I think we need to hear from the community on. The second, which is somewhat related, is should the council use the city tax funds, which it is being asked to contribute to these two groups, to promote unity, or should it continue to fund them separately and support the independent approach? And I guess finally, and maybe even more basic, is exactly what kind of an institution does the public want to see happen? We have tended in the past to talk about a 4-year degree granting university or restore our university. The word university is used most commonly when people speak about this field. But is that exactly what people mean? When they use the word university, do they mean 5,000 or 10,000 students with a full graduate program and a complete range of academic courses? Or do they mean something that is much smaller and less ambitious and less costly, such as we had before in Notre Dame University, which was really more a liberal arts college in the style of Eastern Canada and the United States? Is that, in fact, what people mean?
Thank you.
And should it be public or should it be private?
Thank you, Marty. We're just going to remind our callers that the phone number to call in is 354-4200. Marty just gave you 3 questions that he'd like, and we'd like to hear you answer. We're going to break now for about 3 minutes and do a little man in the street. This time around, we had Mike Overnell was out in the street asking people what they thought about post-secondary education in Nelson. We'll start with that and then get back, hopefully, to some callers. 354-4200 is the number to call in.
University can be the most important time in your life. Nelson University Center can give you that time and help you make the most of it. NUC is a small, private university, a place where students and teachers know each other by name, where learning isn't restricted to the classroom environment. NUC attracts both professors and students committed to personal growth and intellectual challenge through a broad-based, integrated liberal arts program. Nelson University Center may not be for everybody, but it might be just the right place for you. Register now for next fall at the Nelson University Center.
Oh, I think it's very important. In fact, my personal philosophy is that every place ought to have at least a junior college, because children aren't interested in high school studies, so they ought to be able to have the option of going back to college whenever they feel that they are tired of pumping gas and doing dishes.
Yeah, that could be a way, and have, like, I don't know, a degree granting university here would be great too, because that way you wouldn't have to leave here.
All right, I think education-wise, we've got to get into high tech and the electronic cottage kind of attitude, working out of the home, working in distant centers from the home, from the area, and we've got to get education geared in that direction so that the kids don't have to go to Vancouver or Calgary or someplace else to work in their own neighborhood or their own region.
I think I'd prefer to go away, personally, just because I've lived here my whole life and I'd like to experience something else. But I hear there's a really good art school opening up. If there was like a good art and acting school, that's what I'm interested in. I'd be into going here because I like it here and everything. It's just because I've lived here my whole life, I think I'd be into going somewhere else. But I think it would be neat because it's a neat place.
Post-secondary, I happen to think that what should be available for the kids is the option to be able to get more hands-on experience so that they can find out what it is that they enjoy doing. It took me 15 years to find out I wanted to be a goldsmith.
So we're talking about vocational?
More vocational availability. Academics are great. There's only room for so many academics at the top, and the rest of the people spend the rest of their lives doing vocational jobs to pay for their education.
We want to make sure that one or two things are non-negotiable. First of all, autonomy. No matter what happens as a result of the community, the commission, whatever possibility is the result of it, whether it's an independent art school, whether it's an art school which is connected with the Nelson University Center, whether it's an art school connected with Selkirk College, whether it's a brand new university, whatever results we insist will have an autonomous KSA.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Nelson Nightline. Our topic tonight is post-secondary education in Nelson. Alderman Marty Horswill, NUC President Pat Murphy, and Judith MacKenzie from the KSA, Kootenay School of the Art, are our guests tonight. Alderman Horswill put 3 questions out to the community. We'd like to hear you respond and phone in. The phone number is 354-4200. What does the community want? Do we want post-secondary education returned to Nelson? Should the city taxpayer pay for that? And what kind of institution should it be? Should it be a vocational school, an art school, a fine art school? Those sort of questions. We'd like to hear your response, get you to call in. I guess we'll get back to you, Marty, while we're waiting for our first caller. You said you met with Dr. Perry, the education minister right now. Did he have any sort of hope at all for us? Did he leave anything open?
Yes, I left and we had a long meeting. We spent almost an hour and a half with Dr. Perry. I left the meeting quite optimistic, primarily because it was very apparent we were dealing with a minister who wanted to honor his party's commitment to this city that goes back 20 years of establishing a post-secondary degree granting institution here. What he wanted to hear from us is how we thought that could work within the overall provincial system of higher education. exactly what kind of a niche did we think could best be filled in this community and why. And so we explored some ideas. That's what he was looking for, was some ideas. In terms of the commission, he was quite forthright in saying that he wasn't prepared to build up the hopes of the community by holding a commission unless he knew that he had the commitment from his colleagues to deliver on the findings of that commission. And as somebody who appeared before the Cowan Commission in the 1970s and had my hopes, along with those of all the rest of the community, raised by that Royal Commission's recommendation that a university should be established here, only to see the recommendation not implemented for whatever reasons. I don't want to repeat that experience. So I appreciated the minister being quite upfront in saying, I'm not prepared to do this until I know that I've got the rest of my cabinet on side to implement it. And then he went on to talk about the financial situation, and it seemed quite apparent to me that it would be at least the next budget before he would feel ready to approach his colleagues and say, you should spend X number of millions of dollars to establish an institution in Nelson, and this is what it should do, and this is how it will work. In the meantime, he's interested in hearing from us what we think it should be.
Thank you, Marty. You met with Corky Evans last week, I believe?
Yes.
What did he have to offer?
Well, the history of community citizens who tried to work together and go to advanced education, to the ministers of the various governments that have been in power, and through the various people who head up the ministry are long history. And what happens is that often they change, and they might change every 4 years or every 3 years or whatever. And so that the citizens who have volunteered their time at the request of the city to chart a course for a degree-granting university had to look at all of these things and have been looking at them for the last 8 years. So that the kind of program that we've proposed is one that I think has come forward from the community, but also represents the problem solving in the community. We have met with Corky, and he has made arrangements for us to meet with the Honourable Tom Perry, and we will be meeting with him later on this month. We have also worked actively with the Ministry of Advanced Education. We've met with the Ministry of Economic Development as an economic development initiative. And we've also been working very closely with the Human Resource Development Project initiated by the Deputy Minister of Advanced Education. I believe in British Columbia there is a recognition that post-secondary education must be changed and must be strengthened to meet those challenges and the variety of challenges. But no matter what you're looking at, if you saw the town hall, the national town hall, if only 10% of our Canadian population is degree granting or has a university degree, and 50% of the new jobs coming up require a university degree, then we've got to do more in terms of that. And the training will come through industry.
Thank you, Pat. We've got our first caller. Good evening, Nelson Nightline.
Yes, good evening. I have a question. Considering that you're talking about post-secondary education, and I know KSA and everybody else is represented, why isn't Selkirk there? As a student at Selkirk, why isn't Selkirk being represented?
Thank you. Marty, do you want to reply to that?
Well, I didn't set up the format, so I don't think I can.
Well, if you're talking about the show, or you're talking about on the committees, I would presume the show, because Selkirk is not really a Nelson College per se right now. We didn't choose an extra body on the set right here. As far as I understand, in your committee meetings, Marty, I think Selkirk sat in on the first couple of meetings between KSA and NUC and the city, etc., but declined to continue on. Maybe you can explain that for the listener.
Yeah, we did initially invite Selkirk to participate in the first, I believe it was the first 2 meetings that we held around this whole question of trying to seek a unified position. At the second meeting, the president of the Selkirk College Board indicated to us that they clearly had a regional mandate and that it wasn't appropriate, they felt, for the college to be participating in what was the effort of one community to formulate that community's strategy for post-secondary education. And so Selkirk voluntarily withdrew. And we understood the reasons for doing that. That isn't to say, of course, that our community strategy can or should ignore Selkirk College. Selkirk is a very essential component of the whole post-secondary education field, not only in Nelson, but the whole of the West Kootenays. And we want to see what it does in our community continued and expanded if possible. So we recognize the importance of Selkirk, appreciate everything that Selkirk is doing.
And they're an important economic part of the community as well as an educational part.
And in our recent talks with Ed Conroy that Corky set up for us, he made it very clear that any funding for post-secondary education that came into this area would be funneled through Selkirk, or he would feel very uncomfortable with that. So it is an issue that we do have to deal with. We have to consider the interests of all of the MLAs in this area.
Thank you.
We have another caller. Good evening, Nelson Nightline.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
I'd like to ask a question of Pat Murphy, please.
Yes, go ahead.
How many students would you need to pay all the costs so that we wouldn't be dependent on government funding?
Thank you.
In terms of student ratios, if there were 16 and a half students per course, we could begin to pay the salary, which or the contract that we would wish to pay to a faculty member. Our difficulty at this point is that we are not degree granting, and so that many students who would normally choose to come to Nelson University Centre and would actively like to do so won't until we are degree granting, and that this is a difficulty. And in Canada and in the provinces, it is the province that makes it possible for a university to be degree granting. So this is what we're asking of the province of British Columbia. If there isn't any money, if we have a treasury that's stretched, in order to meet the educational demands that are required of British Columbia and of Canadians at this very special time in our history, all we would ask for at this point is degree granting status. And with that status, we will be able to go forward financially. We've done it for 3 years. Yes, there's the generosity of the city, but also the generosity of this community who's matched dollar for dollar every dollar that the city has put in. And also the generosity of Canada Employment in our first year, as KSA has also experienced, and also of the Ministry of Economic Development.
Thank you, Pat.
Pat, just before, I'd be interested in kind of elaborating on this a little more. Do you know what the average cost per student is in Canada or in BC for university level education? And I mean all costs, administration, capital, facilities, as well as instructors and support staff and so on?
The current tuition costs that the average student pays, and ours are just slightly under UBC or UVic or Simon Fraser, pays anywhere from 10 to 20% of the cost. So approximately, if we'll round off some figures just for numbers' sakes, it's about $10,000 a year.
Per student.
Per student. But if you look at all of those where you're looking at that larger picture, what you're really looking at is all of those institutions at this time are also the graduate programs with the large labs, with the heavy administration, with large buildings. Our plan is to keep the
We'll go ahead to Colin.
boring,
Sorry.
yes, but essential.
We'll come back to it. Good evening, Nelson Nightline.
Good evening. I have a question for Judith MacKenzie.
Yes, go ahead.
What is the projected economic impact of an art school on the city of Nelson?
Thank you. Judith?
As it stands now with our present studio-based programs, we would hope to have 300 students, the full-time equivalent of 300 students, and that would bring in about $3.5 to $4 million into the city.
Thank you.
At approximately $6,000 a student's our cost.
Thank you, Judith. Good evening, Nelson Nightline, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. As a degree-holding person who moved to the Nelson area 6 months ago, I'm wondering, I love the idea of a degree-granting university. I think it's wonderful. But seeing as how Corky has already said a commission won't be granted to look at this, why don't we sort of force the issue around maybe an after-degree program for people that are working in the community that can uphold the tax base and upgrade themselves that way and then move on from there.
Thank you, caller.
The graduate programs, we have brought in that one graduate program from Gonzaga University. The difficulty is that in trying to broker courses from the coast is the willingness of coastal universities to cooperate here in the community. Yes, perhaps we need the post-secondary and those, and they are being brought in through Eastern Washington University also. But the problem that they will say is if you don't have the base, you can't have the graduate degree, and you get in this chicken-egg kind of situation. So in terms of looking at what we can do, what our library can support, what the facilities can support, it's an undergraduate university program that we were looking at.
Thank you, Pat. Good evening, Nelson Nightline, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead. You're on the air.
Well, thank you. I didn't get how many students Pat felt we needed to support our university without the government's help. Has she got a number?
Thank you. I thought you did answer it, but if you want to just recap.
In terms of the planning for the campus, it was not. What we're looking at is about 12,000 FTE, 1,200 FTE. That's 1,200 students. But that would be something that would grow over time. And it's a different approach to the production model of you set up the whole thing, you say how the widgets are going to come out, and it goes that way. We're more into a growth model, and that is we'll do whatever it's going to need to do to make it work. And we see we're in a new joint venture, and that is money that is from the community, money from the private sector, and money from the public sector. I think we're trying to look at really creative, new and innovative ways of meeting the educational demand, need, and necessity for the 21st century. And these are people who are not just coming out of high school, that's all of us who are going to have to retool. And so eventually we'd like to see 1,200 students on that campus.
Pat, if I hear you correctly, though, you're not saying the same thing that I think the questioner is, which is that a given number of students, some certain minimum somewhere, allows you to function without government support. You're saying that you want a mix of government, community, and private, and tuition. And I guess the difficulty I have with the caller's question is after sitting on your board for a year and a half, I've yet to hear anybody articulate to me how they can operate a university where the cost per student is somewhere in the 10,000 plus range without government support. Yet you want me and council to believe that your presentation to the government that all you want is a charter but no money is credible. I don't believe it is credible, and I don't think it does the community's case service to present an argument that can't be defended. I'd like to hear how you can finance a university without public funding.
Well, I think we have the same problem as this. If we went back to the beginnings of education here in Nelson, if anyone said those words to those people who started those degrees up, they would have had the same difficulty. The issue is we now have 36 students. We have never gone into the red, and that's thanks to the generosity of the city. But basically, we have a university that's operating for under $75,000 a year, which is the average salary of an associate professor at many of our universities. The thing is that we're moving into new mode, and I don't think that all university professors will be getting that kind of money. We even have university professors who say, take your salary, I would rather teach in a situation in which I can relate to the student, I can teach the courses as I think they need to be taught. So it's a new kind of situation, and it is jumping in feet first, but it is exciting as just starting up a new business. Yes, there are all those figures, but once you get into it, you find out there's different ways of doing things. I think that we can do it for half the price. I think that with the support of the community, with getting corporate dollars, and eventually through some recognition. But right now, I think we can still do it. We're doing it now.
What was the 16.5 students you mentioned previously when the caller called in?
Right, 16.5 students per course. So you just take those figures, you multiply it by 5, and you've got some numbers that are there. It's not the kind of planning that
we'll have to come back to this. We've got another caller. Good evening, Nelson Nightline.
Oh, good evening. Along with what Mr. Horswill has asked, as a member of the community and a student at NUC, I would like to state that when we were at the MAL enrolling students, several young people came up to me and said they would like to go to the Nelson University. Some had already done so. The problem was the refusal by the coast universities to recognise our credits. And in view of their strikes and their students being locked out, I feel that they have no moral right to deny the credits which are given here, particularly as NUC tutors have already shown a great dedication to the university. Some have been working without pay because of their belief in this high ideal.
Do you have a question, ma'am?
Not a question, but in answer, because Mrs. Murphy, Pat is in a difficult position. How can you state how many students you will have when you know very well they want to come, but until their credits are recognised by the coast, they are unable to come. They are learning, they want to get their credits, and they're not being recognised. And I feel it's up to our council and everyone else to put pressure on the coast universities that we get credit for the courses.
Thank you for your comments.
Pardon?
Thank you for your comments.
Also, I feel that NUC has done a great service to this community, and what we need is the council and the community to get to the back of us. It's no use joining up for public funds again if, as has happened before, the university is closed.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Well.
Supporter there. Okay, that's for you to keep track of as a representative on City Council.
That's one vote for the getting behind approach.
I think really we have to see if we want a university of any sort in Nelson, everybody has to get together. I heard Corky Evans say that if you don't get together, there'll be a university in the Kootenays, but it may be in Cranbrook. So I think what we really have to come to grips with is the groups that are out here, KSA, NUC, the city, and any other group, whether it be Selkirk or anybody else, has to work together. I think that's the key issue. If you can amalgamate, you have 136 students, you have 36 students, whatever the number is, and go as a unified body to the government and say we're prepared to work together to get a fine arts come liberal arts university. That's what I say is the answer. Or else what's going to happen if and when there is a commission, it will say, well, they're very wide apart and we're going to go to Cranbrook or somewhere else and open up a university centre there. That's just something that I understand from what Mr. Evans is saying.
But the political agendas have changed, and they keep changing, and this is it. This is why NUC and KSA have asked for their autonomy because of the previous history. So, I mean, let's not blame the victim. Excuse me, please. We weren't the people who set out, we will establish a university. The difference between post-secondary and a university is an interesting one, too. At the beginning, it was the city who said they wanted a vocational school. It was private individuals who started up both of these initiatives. And I think we're going to have to see more of that to meet the need and the demand for the 21st century. Education is going to be a necessity. It's happened below the border. It's happened in Europe. We can see the push if you see what Singapore has done, if you see what Hong Kong has done, we're going to have to educate, and educate very rapidly to meet the needs.
Are you meeting the right needs, though? I mean, you're both fine in liberal arts. Do you think that's the route to go? I mean, today is the computer age, and computer technology and technical skills and vocational skills. One of our man in the street interviews suggested that he spent 15 years working to pay for his education. Do you think maybe you should incorporate, both of you, some technical programs?
What is he doing? He's being a jeweler.
Yes.
Those are the kinds of programs we offer. No, Morrie, not vocational. When you're talking about art classes, you're talking about studio-based producing working artists. You take a good look around Nelson, and you take a good look at the image of Nelson, and what you're going to see is what artists have brought to this community. It isn't Trail, it isn't Castlegar, it's Nelson. It has a distinct flavor. That came from the artists here. Most of us, like me, are 50. So who's going to replace us? You don't train them, you're not going to have them here. What are you going to do? Are you going to bring your art in from some foreign source? What are you going to do? We have the same number of people working in the arts field here as there was in that sawmill down the lake. You're not training them. That sawmill was there. All the employees were over 50. Wouldn't you have a vocational program for them? There is no arts classes in the interior of British Columbia. So what are you going to do? That's what we're doing. And good working studio.
That's part of it, but
that's what we're doing.
But what you need is financing to the government only has so many dollars, and maybe has no dollars for the next 5 years if their deficit is as big as it is.
So we're going to make the biggest run for the best support we can possibly get, and we're going to do that in conjunction with the existing education bodies in this area, all of them.
We have one final caller. Good evening, Nelson Nightline.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to correct Morrie Zaitlin on his comment that he made earlier when he said that Selkirk College is really not a Nelson college per se. I don't think he was listening to Alderman Horswill when he said earlier the role that Selkirk College did play in Nelson, and that it has for a long time. It was connected with KSA and DTUC, and it is very much a part of our picture here. There are 500 students up at that college every day, and those are people from Nelson and from the whole area and from the whole province.
Thank you for your comment.
I don't think I meant it that way. I meant that the reason why they're not represented here is because they're not represented on this committee right now because of their own doing, really. So they play a very important role in the city, as does CIC, and we don't have a CIC representative here. They put in $3.5 million into the community every year, CIC, and take relatively nothing out of it. The people come and go, and they leave their dollars here. Selkirk College is a vocational school, and it does play a very important role. Please don't get me wrong there. But the post-secondary is what we're talking about, and that's what I really meant in defense. But
when you talk these technical jobs, I mean, just take a look at the computer and what's happened to the computer. Yeah. If we go back 10 years ago, the people who've received training on those computers now, that's obsolete, and that's going to increase at a more rapid rate. What we're looking at is a type of education that will give people the flexibility, the problem-solving know-how to be able to keep up with that technology. There is no undergraduate liberal arts university from the coast of Ontario that's non-sectarian to the Pacific border, to the ocean. We're looking at a unique ecological niche. It does not compete with the existing institutions, and it does look to the future. It looks at people who need that broad base to problem solve, to create knowledge. And it's that knowledge creation that's going to make Canada competitive. And it's not antithetical to the arts. What we're looking at is those Renaissance people again.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Well, we only have 15 minutes to go.
15 seconds.
15 seconds to go. Very sorry. We want to ask our listeners to write in if you have any of your own questions that you'd like to hear answers about, what you'd like to see on the show, what your response to the show is. We'd like to hear from you for Shaw Cable's interest and for us for ideas for other shows. I'd like to thank our guests, Marty Horswill, Dr. Pat Murphy, and Judith MacKenzie for being here. I'd like to say good night again to yourself. Thank you very much.